Well, guess what? Big Pharma is already making moves to modify COVID-19 shots against new variants like Omicron, but U.S. health officials are saying that might not be necessary right now. Many experts in the medical community claiming that evidence does not yet support the rolling out of new variant-specific boosters. One top vaccine regulator at the FDA telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, "The reason to have an Omicron-specific vaccine is if you thought that was going to be the new normal." Now, the new variant that is going to take over and continue to circulate over time. But by the time we get an Omicron-specific vaccine manufactured, this wave will be over. Here now to discuss is Dr. Kanta Ahmed, an NYU Langone pulmonologist and International Women's Forum Senior Fellow. Good to see you, Doctor. Good to see you again. Will we need an Omicron-specific variant, or by the time it rolls out in March, will it be not necessary?
So I think what you've described is the classic contrast between government complacency and industry innovation. We know Omicron is the fastest, most transmissible virus the world has ever seen, not only a COVID variant. So at the moment, what we know that mostly the manifestations are mild, and when you get natural immunity, that gives you protection. And our vaccines currently, when boosted, also give you protection. But there are still individuals who become severely ill with this. Now, what if the virus continues to circulate and mutate further and now becomes extremely transmissible and as deadly as some of the other variants? That's the risk. It's a gamble to not prepare. It's absolutely the correct thing to begin innovating the vaccines and tailoring them. BioNTech will have a vaccine candidate by the end of this month, and probably many of the makers will have one by the end of March. And I think that's the right thing to do.
Now, you mentioned
the other thing, David, is
go ahead.
We're looking at it as in the American microcosm, where 62% are fully vaccinated now. The world has received almost 10 billion COVID-19 vaccine doses, but only 9.5% of low-income countries have had any vaccine. And Africa was where this variant came from, where it's circulating freely, unleashed. And that's not safe. So we have to prepare not only for ourselves, but the rest of the world.
You mentioned South Africa a couple of times. We were wondering whether we would have the same experience with Omicron that they had. That is, it travels very fast, but it is less virulent, and it leaves quickly as well. It appears that is what is happening in the United States. We had a new California study. 70,000 people were part of this study, about 70,000. Not only was Omicron much less virulent than other variants, but as you mentioned, natural immunity played a big role in making the sickness much less severe than it would have been even among people who weren't vaccinated, who'd had natural immunity from a previous infection. So it does appear that what happened in South Africa is happening here with Omicron, and that is good news.
So that's good news. Key is prior infection, prior exposure. People can now, we understand, get COVID-19 more than once. And there are individuals who are becoming gravely ill, admitted in our hospital at the moment, who are very severely ill from this variant. And the key word that you said is wondering. We in the United States, the richest, most powerful country in the world, should not be wondering. We should have genomic surveillance. They've now developed artificial intelligence, BioNTech and an African startup, which can assess the 10,000 mutations that are developing in this virus every week. There are 6.3 million genomes of this virus already. It's so massive that we cannot be wondering. We must be surveilling. And one of the things that's happened, the scandal with the rapid testing, is we do not have strong public health epidemiology in the United States. We should be predicting. That startup, BioNTech and Africa, created a startup, picked up Omicron on day one, and picked up the Alpha variant that affected Britain 65 days before the WHO recorded it. So we can do better.
We sure can, particularly when the president said everybody in the world was shocked by what's happening with Omicron. He said that about 3 weeks ago, and that was about a month after the world began to find out what was happening because of the research in South Africa and in the UK. I want to look, though, domestically at you compare two states, Florida and New York. Florida has no mandates. New York has every mandate you could possibly imagine. Florida has no masking. New York has masking everywhere. And yet the death rate, per capita death rate in Florida is below that of New York. What does that tell you?
So, I mean, I'm sitting here having been boosted. I've had 3 doses. I have seen with my own eyes and the data, vaccination cuts deaths, cuts ICU stays, prevents you from being on a ventilator and being on a heart and lung machine, an ECMO machine. But what we have in New York is a huge concentration of people, very unwell, many diseases, very crowded. There's been no focus in this pandemic on the built environment, improving ventilation, installing UVC lights, fixing HEPA filters in schools, public spaces, the infrastructure. We can't even open windows in our offices a lot of times. So that creates an environment which is just ideal for transmitting airborne disease. In Florida, there's so much open space, so many activities outdoors, and Florida, it has also made available the Regeneron very freely, so that was an additional advantage. And one word I would say is, mandates are a very sensitive area. My experience is one is always best served by informed consent, teaching patients, giving them choices, showing them information. Government by decree doesn't work, and I think the Supreme Court sort of ruled in that direction this week.
Yeah. Well, our country was built on the opposite of government by decree, on individual responsibility, and that's what made us the nation that we are, the nation that much of the world would like to be. Unfortunately, we're losing some of that. Doctor, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it. Have a good weekend.
Pleasure, Dave.